and Dr. Gopal Reddy for putting in so much effort to get me here. After I come here, I realize I'm unfit to be a speaker because all of you are convinced about proteins. And I spent my lifetime trying to convince my community of nutrition scientists that what India requires is protein. And what we are doing to India is we are actually playing a kind of scientific fraud on our poor people. I'm sorry for using such a harsh word. And I'll explain to you where we have gone wrong and why I would say I require all your help to change the way people eat food. Because today food is, in poor households especially, is equated with rice. If Annam Tinnava, I'm from Telugu land, Annam Tinnava is food. Annam is food. Here, I don't know what Kannada is like or Tamil, but in the north, roti, if you roti khai hai, if you've eaten roti, that is food. So we still live as if we are in a famine situation. Nobody goes beyond annam or rice or roti. So this has been my major battle with my scientific community, and I feel so good being here where I don't have to convince you about protein, but I'll take you through the science to tell you where we have made some very big mistakes, and it's a confession of the fact that scientists sometimes think that they have to plan for the government and make sure that the government doesn't spend too much. I don't know why scientists have to do that work, but they have been doing it. So the real problem is, in India, calorie-dense foods are considered food. And let me see if I can change the slide. Now, I'll quickly go through this. This is a WHO standard for children's weights and heights. What is interesting is, if you look at boys and girls, there's no difference. The trouble with the nutrition science is, the Westerners will come down and say, you know what, the mothers prefer the boys, they feed the boys better than the girls, and they really divert our attention from the main thing. If you go to a poor household, there's no difference between girls and boys. There is so much poverty that, okay, a boy may get a little more biscuit or a toffee or something because he creates more noise. But there's no difference in the nutrition status. Both boys and girls are very badly off. And I'll show you why. This is a WHO standard. And if you can see behind, you will see that on the left side is age, the height and weight for boys. It's the same for girls, so I won't. Look at between 0 and 1 year. The height increases, desirable height increases 25 centimeters in 1 year. Can you imagine this? And where does height come from? It comes from your bones and muscle and tissues, and you have to grow 25 centimeters. Has any one of you thought about it? None of your children grow 25 centimeters in 1 year. But this is the kind of growth that is desirable. Both boys and girls, from 49.9 to 75.7. By second, third, fourth year, it is 12 centimeters, 9 centimeters. Imagine every year the child has to grow 9 centimeters, 12, 10, you name it. Where is the food for these children? What is the kind of food mothers are able to give these kids for this kind of a growth? They can't grow with rice. Annam papu, no. They cannot put on that height. They require quality food. Is there anyone giving them or talking to them about quality food? This is the angst. Yes, affordability is one, but the government has an ICDS program, okay? And isn't it time that this data is used to make sure that ICDS program is flooded with eggs, if not anything else? I agree chicken is very difficult, but we should make sure the government money is used for providing eggs. Do you know when eggs are given ICDS? Unfortunately, Karnataka has stopped, Madhya Pradesh has stopped. All the group states that believe vegetarianism is in Indian culture have stopped giving eggs. So if there is no eggs, the child has a deficiency of, doesn't put on more than 5 centimeters or 3 centimeters. So the stunting that happens, when I say stunting, children are short, cannot be made up later on. I think the compensation is impossible. That's why they say the first 1,000 days for a child are so crucial, because that's the time they put on height. And height is bone and muscle and blood and all the tissues and the brain, and all that is protein. It is not annam, it's not rice, for God's sake. Rice doesn't get into our heads. Rice is necessary for activity. You feed the child rice, the child will go down the slum 5 times, he'll run around after a dog or a cat or something like that. That's energy for activity, it is not for growth, right? This is the kind of India we have, and you can see this girl is an adult already. She's shorter than her mother. They come from a fairly poor background. Now, what we know is in the West and in our class of people, the new generation is becoming taller. Actually, when I looked at the men in this room, I was telling my son, look how tall everyone is, right? Because of the quality of food you had from 0 to 16 years. Now, let me tell you one more interesting thing. Height is archaeologically significant. If you look at me short, I am short, of course. That is because during my growing years in the 1950s and 60s, I come from a refugee family from Pakistan. They were very difficult conditions. There was no question about protein foods. So if you look at me, you can think about my growth phase where there wasn't adequate quality of food. Okay, so height is an archaeologically significant parameter that we can measure. The easiest is to look at mother and daughter. There's a difference of 30 years or 25 years. And look at this. This girl is not going to grow taller. This is called lack of secular increase in height. But look at Aishwarya Rai and your Deepika Padukone and all. They're all 6 footers, okay? 5'8", 5'10", etc. There is a class difference. Those who have better food, the new generation is taller. And I won't ask all of you, how many of your children are taller than you? Or you are taller than your parent? Most of you are taller than your parents, right? I don't even want you to put up your hands. So, well, this is a pattern. Same age group of 11, 12-year-old boys. We have done the study, followed them up, and look at the height differences, largely based on food, inadequate food. Now, how do we compensate for this? I don't have to tell this August gathering, whether it's boys or girls, the same thing. Look at the same age group with height difference. Height is not genetic. Height is first nutritional, and if you do not have too many diseases or any chronic disease, genetics comes after you've reached your potential. Then you do not grow taller than that. But we haven't reached our genetic potential. Europe has reached a genetic potential almost 1930s and 1940s. They reached their heights and now they are not growing taller. India has put on 1 to 2 centimeter per decade. At this rate, we have to wait for another 100 years for our children to grow tall. Why do we send them to Olympics? We don't. We want them to be sports persons. We want them to be tennis players, etc. We better talk food for children. Okay? This is a middle class where the daughter has just managed to put on 1 centimeter more than her mother. This is mother-daughter. We did large studies, so I'm just giving you one picture. The daughter is a little taller than the mother. But look at the kind of data we have. Recently, we had this global hunger index and the government is so upset. But it is a fact. If you look at weight for age, after all, we all put on weight as we grow up. 41.8% of children did not have enough weight. Forget about other details. So even their weight, almost half the population of children. Height for age, 43% shorter than what they should have been. And even for that short height, after all, your weight is distributed, and if you're not tall enough, at least you should have enough weight. No. 22% did not have even adequate weight for height. That's called wasting. And now global hunger index, 17.3% are wasted. That I looked at the report yesterday, and we are last in the list of 116 countries. I think all of you are saying India is growing, doing so well. I wish it would be reflected in these figures. So I would like to share your enthusiasm, but unfortunate figures are not. So there is an absence of secular changes in heights, and it's worse among the SCs, STs, and the poor and rural areas. There is really a food crisis for men, women, and children, and it's worse among the marginalized. So, where did we go wrong? After all, Indians are brilliant people. We need to go back to the 1930s and 40s. What we did was very brilliant. We had beautiful laboratories, well-trained personnel who analyzed foods into carbohydrate food, protein food, vitamin foods. All of you know about it, so I won't go into it. And we realized you can get calories from everything. You can get calories from carbohydrate, protein, and from fat. And though scientists knew that carbohydrates will only help you to spend energy to do work, etc., but proteins are necessary for growth, for tissue repair, for blood, for bones, hormones, everything, and vitamins and minerals, of course, for the reactions. In 1937, we had analyzed 300 foods, 1937, okay? And this is the volume available in the laboratory where all 300 foods were analyzed. And what do we find? That the scientists and the bureaucrats were very, very smart. They realized no point in talking of proteins and other things. Calories are what we require in large amount. And by this time, Soviet Union was taking care of its population. So we followed the Soviet model, and we decided that people should be recommended diets in terms of calories. So sedentary was 2,400, you know that, based on the work they did. Heavy workers require more calories, fine, all of you know this. And it was also recommended for children based on the age. So a child of 12 months requires 100 calories per kg, and by 7 years a child requires almost as much as an adult, right? 1950 calories. The scientists were very confident that the bureaucrats will take care that these calories come from all the foods. Foods like cereals, pulses, eggs, meat, bananas, fruit. This is what the scientists thought. But the bureaucrats in India had to use their budget, and they became smarter. They looked for cheapest source of calories and to calculate the amount of daily needs. Okay? But remember, calories are necessary, used for calculating poverty, used for calculating wages, used for calculating the food that the army gets, hostels, prisons, calories, calories, calories. Okay? And bureaucrats decided cheapest source of calories are cereals. Other nutrients they did not know, they were not educated enough. And remember, bureaucrats get transferred from the food department every other day. So, but no one objected because India had come out of a famine period, so it was allowed. After all, some food in the stomach is better than no food. But government officials don't read documents. So though the document says, and this is Aykroyd in 1944, he said, the non-cereal portion of the diet is very important. It must be used to provide nutrients. After that, you give the cereal portion. But this can be put up and framed because nobody reads this. And throughout the text of that bulletin I showed you in 37 says, please give milk and eggs to children, replace milled rice with parboiled rice. Remember, we had terrible famine conditions. And please add oil or ghee in the diets because oil and ghee are rich sources of calories. The planners and scientists, of course, were only looking at cheap sources of calories. Okay, and they looked at cereals because cereals provide bulk. It is gives you satiety and culturally acceptable, of course. We are all a cereal eating nation. And they started calculating. Bureaucrats thought that they were Aryabhattas of nutrition. So started calculation of calories in foods, and this is what they find, that if this is the amount of calories in 100 grams, all of you know that cereals, 100 grams is 360, and the cost, if you want to give 2,400 calories, it may be 30 rupees, okay? Similar, but if you give potatoes 2,400 calories, you have to spend 80 rupees, go on down, you'll find that meat, if you have to give 2,400 calories, it costs 240 to 600. So obviously they zeroed down on cereals. You can do the calculation. 100 grams has so much calories, 2,400 will be so many grams of food. Is that correct? Okay. So the bureaucrats, remember, least cost, budgeted, try and cringe on everything, and people needed food, not cheapest calories. Okay? What about growing children, pregnant lactating women? Nobody thought about them. They require proteins in abundance, and especially from animal foods like milk, eggs, fish, meat, because protein derived from vegetable sources have a very poor biological value. When I say biological value, the amino acids are not complete. So if egg and milk is the standard protein, if you say 100, the pulse and the other proteins are 60, 70. Soya bean is the worst, of course. It's something like 45. Soya bean has a lot of anti-nutrients, lots of other problems. Anyway, it was not part of our diet. Animal proteins have about 20% protein, but all of it gets into your system. It becomes your skin and bones and muscle, etc. Whereas cereal, rice, wheat, millet, etc. has 6 to 10% protein, but its biological value is much less. So, but then the government didn't stop. The scientists are very fond of doing research. They started looking for vegetarian sources of protein, and in all the studies, children who were given egg and milk really grew well. These were studies for 20 weeks, 6 months, 8 months, and they had better height and weight compared to vegetarian group. Okay? Children given cooked soya beans actually lost height. They did not put on height at all. So soya bean was thrown out of window. This was in the 50s and 60s. By 55, it was clear, whatever the source of vegetable protein, it is milk and egg is the best, is what, for children, right? And their results were superior to the vegetarian sources of protein. But very interesting, you do a research paper, but conclusions you can contradict. And if some of you are smart, you will know that the conclusions contradict the main paper. In the conclusions, we had a giant called Dr. Gopalan, who writes, the paper concludes that animal protein cannot provide the basis of large-scale solution of the problem of protein malnutrition. Imagine, all the research papers are showing that egg and milk is the best, but the conclusions are animal protein cannot provide. I don't know how he came to this, and nobody questions him because they are all big giants in these research labs. Whether it is Vardarajan, Swaminathan, Gopalan, I mean, they're all over the country, these uns that we have. This is the way they scientifically brought us to the status of vegetarianism. So don't blame the government today if we are forced to be vegetarian. It happened in the 50s in my laboratory, and no one points it out because they are so big. These people are big, big people, okay? Now, of course, then they discovered that if you eat rice and dal, rice and pulse in a proportion of 4:1 or 3:1 at every meal, then your protein is not bad. Which person eats rice and dal in that proportion at every meal? So the Gopalan said, brilliant, in devising cheap, well-balanced diets in India, economic considerations, now he says economic considerations, preclude the inclusion of milk and other animal foods. Okay, fine, say economic reasons. Don't say that it is scientifically perfect. So a calculated diet of calories is, first, this is the recommended diet that was there for 25 years for hostels, for the nation, for wages, for poverty. And see, there is no nuts, no eggs, no fish, no fruit, no meat. And all of us have sworn that this is the best diet, whereas we know that this was causing the stunting that we all are suffering today. There is plenty of cereal. Even the ratio of cereal to pulse is not 1:4. There's very little leafy vegetables. Milk is 150 ml, which is like 2 cups of tea, and fats and sugar. So what they say is, so when we look at the diet surveys, you see that for a 1 to 3-year-old and 4 to 6-year-old, the intakes are 700 and 1000. actual recommended diet, now we have to talk of calories. There's a deficiency of 6 to 700 calories. That is because children cannot consume calories from cereals. Okay, the PDS was launched, it gives only rice and wheat. Many other things, whether ICDS, school lunch program, give more rice, add more rice. During the pandemic, give 5 kilos of rice, give another 5 kilos, keep on giving rice. For God's sake, children cannot eat rice. You have to, for an 8 kg child of 1 to 2 years who requires 1200 calories, it has a very small stomach capacity, 30 ml per kg. And you will realize that in that capacity, you have to feed the child enough food that has calories, proteins, other nutrients. And if you look at the energy density, the best energy density that will provide calories plus proteins is milk and eggs, 0.6 and 1.7, bananas, and then oil is 9. So all of us know how we put so much ghee into our khichdi. All of us know that the stories of Krishna, of eating butter, why can't our children get that kind of food? The beautiful stories of Krishna robbing butter and milk and all that. Why is it that we don't apply it to our everyday practices of feeding children? But those stories are in Panchatantras and other books. Sugar, of course, has a high density of calories, but it doesn't have any other nutrient. It's 4. Bread is good because it has a small volume and lots of calories. Oil is a lot, but oil doesn't give you anything else. And potato, vegetables, you must smash and add. Its density is not much. But if you look at it, the best is milk and eggs. It gives you protein, smaller volume, and calories. So, if you look at energy density, let me go back. Look at rice. You can have 3.5 in 1 gram, but actually after rice is cooked with 3 times water for children, energy density is 0.8. So what do? If you give a child a food with 0.8 density, you have to feed the child 6 to 7 times a day. And it's not easy to feed children so many times. But if you increase the density, the number of feeds can come down because the volume is so small, right? There is actually a lot of science if we really want to listen and understand and change tracks. I think we must accept we have made a big mistake. Let us change the way we are. The WHO recommends that 30 to 40% of calories should come from fat. And rightly too, because fat is dense and vitamin A, calcium, etc. must come from flesh foods, eggs, etc. And cereal should be added last. Okay? So you can increase energy density by cooking eggs in oil and ghee, frying foods, children love fried foods, then add smashed green leafy vegetables, carrots for the vitamins. Now, what is obesity in India? They say obesity is increasing. Shall I show you this picture of obesity? This is, you can get, in fact, the Egg Association should do studies of this kind, give children eggs and do a DEXA. DEXA is a very safe technology, no radiation, and it measures your bone, mineral fat, muscle, and the percentage fat of every part of your body. So if you're a tennis player, you want your right hand to have more muscle, you could monitor this person. What do I see? Let's look at the last line. This woman is a worker. Her weight was 39 kilos, height was 148, right on top. And this machine shows that her minerals, BMC's bone mineral content, it is 1.1 kg, last line. Fat was 13 kilos, okay? Muscle is only 25. Total the same weight, it corresponds very well. She's 33% fat. She's only 39 kilos. 1/3 of her is fat. This is obesity in India. We are thin and fat. Persons who are vegetarian diets, you will find their fat percentage is 50% of the body is fat. We need to convert it if we want people to have less diabetes, blood pressures, etc. So with this, I would like to stop. Of course, there is the other picture which gives you each left arm, right arm. I thought it's just too much data. But it's important to know that even thin people have a lot of fat. How do we convert this fat into muscle? Ultimately, it is muscle that's the respiring tissue to see that diabetes, blood pressure kept at bay, and it cannot come from rice and wheat. With this, I'd like to stop. Thank you very much.